Welcome back to People-Centered Innovation, Wrangle's newest podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca Holland. This series of mini podcast episodes explores the intersection of people and technology from the perspective of leaders who are making waves, big and small. For our second episode, I'm talking to Stacey Louie, CEO of HyperDrive Agile. I asked Stacey one big question: is Agile changing? Stacey, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about HyperDrive?
Absolutely. My name is Stacey Louie. I'm the CEO of HyperDrive Agile Leadership, and we specialize in helping companies and teams and organizations transform from an old operating model, something that's traditional that you might have seen back in the 70s and 80s, to something that's more relevant in 21st century. So we incorporate things like innovation, lean thinking, lean design, agile, and all things kind of refined into what it takes to be competitive in our market space today.
So what innovations and trends are you seeing in your company's partners, in the wider industry? How's Agile changing?
Oh, wow. How's Agile changing the way companies and partners are evolving? Well, I think the evidence of the pandemic has really proven to be very interesting and unique, and as it's impacted everybody. So everybody's got their own experience, but there are a lot of experiences that are common. And this is what's really interesting, because I think the science is going to really unpack a lot of things about how we engage as individuals and how we create interesting new things, while at the same time balancing the things that we need to do to keep the lights on for our organizations. So I think if you could look at the pandemic at the very beginning, a lot of us, I'm sure, Rebecca, you had the same experience, but I was on the phone and on Zoom constantly. In fact, we went through this Zoom fatigue, and it was back-to-back meetings. In fact, we didn't change the way we behaved. And so what's happened is companies have realized this Zoom fatigue is getting worse and worse. And what I'm starting to see is companies are shifting how they engage. So no longer do we see the back-to-back Zoom meetings. So what this is telling me is that in order to have great innovation, organizations are discovering that having people locked in a room for 8 hours a day isn't going to get you there. It's really, and at the same time, you don't necessarily need to have face-to-face contact to innovate. So there's this interesting thing that's happening because of the pandemic. So where are companies taking this? You're seeing that a lot of these collaboration tools are being amped up. Tools like Zoom, of course, but there are other tools out there like Miro and Mural, which are great collaboration tools that are floating up, and people are using these in combination with their conversations on Zoom. But we're also seeing that people are being more human. So being able to escape for lunch is now, it's okay to do that. We don't need to be highly amped up 100% of the time.
You're right that the back-to-back Zoom meetings are extremely fatiguing. They require much more energy than being in person with people. I mean, I think a lot of people, whether you're more extroverted or introverted, you get energy from other people. One of the things I really miss is having a great whiteboarding session with a colleague, and doing brainstorming and coming up with ideas. And then when you get back to your desk, you're really excited to get started. And I find now on Zoom, I can have a great conversation, but when it's over, I just, I just fall down, and I don't have that buzz of energy and that excitement to get the work done. I'm interested in what you said about retros, because we're running them with my team, the marketing team at Rangle now, and they're really important for us just for context setting. I was saying to Nick, our CEO, I don't overhear things anymore. I don't have the context of what my colleagues are doing just from being around, sitting in the office, sitting at my desk and hearing, someone say to someone else, "Hey, we're working on this week." Like I miss that context of just overhearing things and absorbing from being in the office. And I think that a lot of people would agree with that. It's not that you're spying on your colleagues or something. It's just that when you're all sitting in a room together, you're going to pick up that information.
Yeah, that's wonderful. What I love about what you said, Rebecca, is we are working in a world with this pandemic where if we're not on Zoom all the time in meetings, we're kind of isolated. We're working by ourselves. There's walls. We might have the cat running around. We might have the dog barking, and kids are tugging at us. But we are kind of alone. And the challenge with that, when you don't get the peripheral effect of the halo conversations, then we start losing context of what the other person's doing. We lose that secondary communication just by being around each other. And what could be interesting as we think about thinking with an agile mindset is, what would it look like if we just checked in with each other every day? Just every day, we'll check in with each other, 15 minutes, just talk about the things that we're engaged on, what's on our priority list, keep it very simple and succinct. It might be something like what we see in a Scrum stand-up, but it doesn't have to be. The idea is, let's get everybody kind of involved at a very high level so that we can collaborate where we need to. And when we find the point at which we overlap and that we need some conversation or we need some dialogue to remove dependencies or what have you, what a great opportunity to flesh that out. If you invest 15 minutes in that every day, you spend more time getting your coffee going. So why not spend 15 minutes to set your day off right? It's a great time to connect and really kind of set the entire team on a good path. So way to go. I think that would be a way to just continue to amplify that.
And a lot of times you're right, they take 15 minutes. It's just a matter of not only understanding the work we're doing, but kind of taking the temperature of the team as well. How are people feeling emotionally? How are they struggling with work? Like, that's important too. And I think, maybe that's getting left out of the conversation a little bit. When you're with your colleagues physically, you can support each other a little bit more readily. When we're apart, we need to ask the question, how are you doing? And really
That's
answer
right.
it, not answer it in that Canadian way of saying, yeah, I'm great, I'm good.
Canadians are very polite and they're wonderful. I think that I love Canadian culture almost as much as I like poutine. Creating community in the pandemic has been insanely difficult. It's hard, and when people build community, at least in the old world, the pre-COVID world, we would do things like, let's go to a meetup or let's go to a conference, and we all get together and great things happen. We learn a lot in the sessions, don't get me wrong, but we have a lot of fun after the sessions when we're at the bars having a drink or having dinner, really building that face-to-face network. And this is what's kind of crazy. We've lost that. So what do? How do we replace it? We're seeing some interesting things occur. Like we actually had the global Scrum coaches gathering. It was the Scrum coaches retreat held by Scrum Alliance. We helped put this together. We ran this around the world. So we had 12 hours of content, and in helping out with North America, I discovered, wow, we have this very interesting dynamic where we have a group of people together. But the challenge was we couldn't talk. There were far too many people. It's hard to have a dialogue when there's another 1,500 people on the line with you. So what do? We try to go to these smaller meetups, and that's been a lot of fun. We're finding that the smaller meetups are still connecting. That's still fueling a community, but it's fueling a different community. One where we're actually having a little bit more of a personal dialogue about what's happening in our world. And I think that's a distinct difference. You may see the same thing at your work with your coworkers. You may have seen that your coworker had a dog and you didn't realize it, or they have 5 kids and you didn't realize it, and they come in and you start seeing things through a different context. That person on the other line is mom, not just Mary, right? And that's just like crazy, and it really helps shape your empathy. So if anything, communities as a whole, as we connect and we build our skill set through developing capabilities to our communities in our traditional meetup and conference sort of way, in a different way, I think we're getting deeper in our relationships. We're actually having an opportunity to talk about who we are as humans. So, but it is difficult and challenging in this environment.
I think that leads very much to my next question. Is this shift in work shifting more fundamental agile theories?
is is this, I don't know if COVID is shifting agile theories. It's really hard for me to even guess if what's the causation of shift of how we work. But I would say that it is exposing some of our weaknesses. And that's what Agile is really good at doing, is showing us, gosh, where do we need some help? So are we finding communication gaps? What we've seen is, on one side, we've seen some companies out there. There's a pharmaceutical company that we're working with, and they were working on a COVID solution. And one of the programs they had was they weren't really thinking they wanted Agile, and that was okay. What they needed to do was try to get a solution out the door. So this is what they did. They went in and they weren't getting fast enough feedback. So every day they would meet and they would have a dialogue about what they were accomplishing the previous 24 hours. If you're an Agilist or someone who does Scrum, it sounds like a stand-up. Well, guess what? They were doing a stand-up. Did they know that they were doing this daily Scrum? They had no idea there was a label for it. They were just meeting. In fact, it was so interesting. The pace of learning accelerated so fast. They said to themselves, this COVID thing is pretty impactful. Instead of doing this once a day, let's do it twice a day. Their mindset was, the more frequently they met to have that dialogue, the faster they were learning. The faster they were learning, the faster they're getting to a solution. So it's kind of interesting. Did they need Agile and Scrum to do this? Not really. They actually ended up falling into that pattern. And those are things that we want to promote.
Yeah, there's something interesting there, actually, because it's not just that, like, they were doing Agile. And it doesn't matter if they didn't know they were doing a stand-up. It doesn't matter if they didn't know that they were doing Scrum. The words, the terms, that's not Agile. And I think that's something that I've talked a lot about with colleagues and that kind of thing. With our clients or with any other company, you can do the ceremonies and not be Agile, or you can implement the best ideas of Agile and not call them ceremonies, but still, just like the pharmaceutical company you mentioned, get moving faster, get learning faster. It's the spirit of Agile rather than the letter of Agile, kind of like the spirit of the law rather than the letter of the law.
Yeah, that's well said. Here's a little Agile coach mind trick. It's like a Jedi mind trick. Or it's kind of like Fight Club, right? It's like, we don't talk, the greatest Agilists actually don't talk about Agile. Now think about that. Sure, we talk about frameworks when it's time to talk about frameworks, but when we're first having a dialogue with someone who's looking for help, really all we're trying to do is we're trying to accelerate flow, we're trying to increase customer value, and we're trying to reduce waste. Really, those are the things that we're trying to do. And so when we take a problem set and we just tackle it with that kind of lens, it's far more digestible and easier to understand. So the first things we do is, hey, let's talk about where you're at. Let's not just pummel you with a bunch of different syntax like Scrum and Scrum Master and Product Owner. I mean, those are valuable, don't get me wrong. But sometimes when we first start, it's more important to talk about agility over Agile.
Right, and that's something I've spoken a lot about with colleagues, the difference between Agile, capital A, and real agility. Like, I mean, it's night and day, really. It's like we said before, it's the letter versus the spirit of the law. And the spirit of Agile is what companies need. It doesn't matter what they call it.
I don't know if you guys knew, but it's the 25th anniversary of Scrum, the Scrum Guide. Jeff
Amazing.
Sutherland.
Congratulations, Scrum.
Oh, congratulations, Scrum. Woohoo, have a little party.
Really.
It's a great anniversary. I mean, after 25 years, it is getting stronger and stronger in terms of adoption. And what we've learned through all this is Scrum is a framework that's helping companies and teams. And those who do Scrum really well, they're the ones who are walking away with some great performance, and they're learning quite a bit. There's also been some other learnings about, what can we do to inspect and adapt. And the great thing about this version of the Scrum Guide is it's fresh from in 2020 since its last publication in 2017. And there are a couple interesting things that they did to it, things that kind of blew my mind in one way. But Rebecca, it was like, duh, how come we haven't been doing this in the first place? How come the Scrum Guide didn't have that in 2017? What's going on? I'd like to share a few things, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Please do share.
All right. So the new Scrum Guide, check this out. It starts out, and the biggest change, in my opinion, is the addition of something called the product goal. Now, here's what they've done. The product vision was there in the past, and with this change, they said, well, this vision is still kind of like this gray area. It's not very clear what a vision is, and product owners are really having a tough time. So instead, they developed a product goal. And so the idea is, from a product owner perspective, we should have goals of what we want the product to do for the benefit of the business. And that's something that should be added into Scrum. So while it was always kind of there before, it's now more distinct now. I think that's one of the biggest changes to help product.
I think that's amazing, because I literally had this discussion a few weeks ago with a friend at another company who's getting his department set up. And he was showing me, the vision he'd outlined and everything. And I said, okay, that vision is really nice. What are you guys actually going to do? And we had this real sort of back and forth and argument about what a vision is. And I said, you know what? When someone hands me a vision statement, I'm like, okay, that's kind of cute, but I want the concrete, the measurable goals. Like, this is what we're going for. So I think that's an amazing update, and one that I definitely welcome for Scrum.
That's fantastic. I love the idea, and you said measurable. I mean, the succinct thing about the product goal, it is something that you can start integrating ideas and concepts that we've used in the past. Things like SMART goals. Is your product goal SMART? Meaning, is it simple? Is it measurable? Is it actionable? I mean, you start pulling all these components into the product goal, and you can really make this product goal crisp and beneficial for your stakeholders. It's something that you might be able to tie directly into strategy. So goals are great, but you now have a vehicle that connects your company strategy with the product or service that you're working on, with what the team's delivering. So when you string all that together, there's a great flow. So I love the fact that they added a product goal. And while vision is great, and we love product vision, I think goal just makes it much more succinct. Another thing that you see missing from the Scrum Guide. Now, check this out. Scrum's all about iterating, and we refine ourselves. Well, the writers of the Scrum Guide, Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland, they took it to another level. So they took the Scrum Guide and they cut 1/3 of it out. So you talk about waste reduction, right? They took it to heart. Not only did they come up with some freshness in the Scrum Guide, they cut that thing down by 1/3. Is it great? It's like they eat their own steak, they drink their own champagne. I love it. A thing that they pulled out was the retrospective. Now, I love the retrospectives, but they didn't make it so explicit and defined. So they pulled out a couple of things from the retrospective, things like about explicitly telling people to put an improvement into the backlog for the next sprint. I think from their perspective, they're like, wait a second, improvements shouldn't necessarily be a backlog item. It should be always continuous. So let's not fixate improvements in the same line as Scrum. And another meeting change that they made to help remove some of the robotics. I mean, if you think about Mr. Roboto back in the 80s, it's very robotic. It felt really robotic when teams were forced to answer the 3 questions, right? I don't know if you remember the 3 questions from Scrum.
Definitely.
What did you do yesterday?
Yeah.
What are you doing today?
It's
What
true.
are your
There's some
impediments?
Scrums that flow, or some retros that really flow, and everyone really loves it. But I think we've all been in that robotic, I'm forced to be here retro. And especially if, the team is smaller and meeting on a regular basis, a retro can sometimes seem a little silly. You're telling people what they already know because you already told them. So it's great to remove some of that rigidity around what a retro is.
Yeah, I mean, it's that prescriptive feel. And, we talk about flow. And if any of you watching like Dancing with the Stars, come on, true confessions, we all sneak a little peek every once in a while, right? It's those dancers that are like really stiff and they're gonna fall apart. I mean, it looks horrible. It's the dancers who find some sort of flow. I think from that Scrum perspective, we really want to build that flow of a dialogue, and really to understand and not necessarily fall into a set of rituals, like asking a bunch of questions and getting a bunch of answers and having us be really kind of fixated on that. We've seen a lot of teams get way fixated on those concepts to the point where it's not even helpful. So don't even ask.
Right. That's great. I'm excited about these changes. I think that, it sounds like the authors have really dug in and done the work and probably spent a lot of time embedded with teams who are learning Scrum and teams who are more experienced with Scrum and seeing where the pitfalls are and what they can do to improve that for people who are new coming in or practitioners who are updating their skills.
Jeff and Ken have shifted it so that it's now explainable and understood from both a tech and non-tech lens. And while Scrum started in tech, that's not where it's going to stop. And the benefits are just cross company. So it's great to see companies out there who are running their entire organization on Scrum. And it's just great to watch, and they've discovered something that few companies have been able to master. So
it's true.
Kind of neat to see.
It's amazing. And like you said, it's enabling real agility.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Stacey. This was really great. Thanks for listening to this episode of People-Centered Innovation. We'll be back next week with another 20 minutes to make you think, spark conversations, and get you seeing tech in a broader way. Special thanks to my guest, Stacey Louie. This podcast is produced and recorded by me, Rebecca Holland. Our editor is Igor Vichikov, and our executive producer is Michelle Huang Rutherford. Our theme music is provided by PremiumBeat.com. If you'd like to hear more from me and the Rangle team, please visit us at Rangle.io and check out Rangle.io/blog. We'll see you next week.